Welcome to the Counterweight podcast. I am Doug Rogers, Chief Revenue Officer and Managing Partner for Waypoint Healthcare Solutions. And I'm joined weekly by my co-host, James Canary, founder and owner of the Upper Right Corner. Together, we are focused on speaking to and learning from growth leaders across the healthcare space about their journeys and lessons learned. James and I want to explore how growth leaders manage this tension, not only for their teams, but also with their leaders and in many cases, board members and investors. We will discuss with our guests the career journey they have been on, key influences that help them put them into the position they are today. We will talk about successes and challenges, what they learned from these events for themselves and for their teams. Join us each week for a new episode with our guest. You can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn under the name The Counterweight Podcast. Subscribe, like, follow, and give us feedback as we go along. Now on to the show. Hello and welcome to the Counterweight Podcast. My name is Doug Rogers, and today I'm joined by a guest co-host, Lauren Draina. And yes, you may recognize she is an alumni of the podcast, but today she is a co-host of the podcast. Joining us, she just recently started her new venture called The Growth Opportunity. Please go check it out. She's doing phenomenal work. I know we'll probably touch on a couple of things that how she thinks about this space. So Lauren, one, thank you for jumping in and joining as a guest co-host today. And we have as the guest on the pod, Michael Blumental, joining us from California, I believe, right? Oakland, California. She is the Chief Strategy Officer for Hyro. As an aside, I've told her this, I've told her Chief Marketing Officer this. I fundamentally believe Hyro is the best marketing organization in the industry. And I would say in the industry, but definitely in the healthcare industry. I know marketing's not your purview, but I just got to give a shout out. Y'all put some of the best content out there. I read it. I love it. I know everybody else does. It's phenomenal. So Michael, thank you for taking the opportunity to join. Why don't we start, just introduce yourself, talk a little bit about what Hyro is in your current role as Chief Strategy Officer, and then we'll dive right in.
Well, first off, thank you for the kind words and thank you for having me here. It's such an honor and I cannot wait to be part of the alumni group. Definitely a very good network to be part of. So my name is Michael Blumental. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer at Hyro. We are a market leader for conversational AI agents that are purposely built for healthcare. And I'm also very excited to share that I've just started my new position on the board of Chime as well.
Yes, congratulations.
Thank you very much.
That's very exciting.
I hear about that too.
So recently started with Chime. You've been now since I think June of last year, the Chief Strategy Officer there at Hyro. Guide us a little bit for our audience. What exactly is a Chief Strategy Officer? What does your day look like? And then I know we're going to tease out because, right, you've been in this role for a year, but I believe you're a salesperson at heart, if you will. We'll touch on that, but tell us a little bit about how you think about your day to day.
Well, strategy can mean many different things. Every organization has a different definition for it. For Hyro, I oversee our customers, our partners, and strategic initiatives. And I joined Hyro about 6 years ago when we were just 10 people. So going from that to becoming a market leader has been one hell of a journey. A very fun and exciting journey, but a lot of hustle for sure along the way. So up until a year ago, I was Chief Revenue Officer. So when I joined, I was the first salesperson, first partners, customer manager, all of that. And as the business grew, my organization grew together with it. And about a year ago, we made a strategic decision to hire a leader that will run sales, all the day-to-day sales. And so I handed that over. I'm still very much involved with sales, and for the strategic accounts, I work very closely with our sales teams to get in.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that's awesome. Looking at your kind of background a little bit and conversations that we had leading up to this, like, I would say you have maybe a little bit of, like, hopefully you're not offended by this, like a non-traditional path to that Chief Revenue Officer. Like, talk a little bit about how you got there. We know that sales is in your heart, but like, what did that journey look like for you?
So my first sales job was actually when I was 18. I now live in Oakland, but I grew up in Israel. And in Israel, when you're 18, you have to go to the army. It's mandatory for everyone. So I had 3 months before that. I went to London and I was selling hair curlers at a department store. And so that was the first great adventure for when it comes to sales because it helped me shed any sense of shame I had because I was literally stopping women walking down the aisle and asking, "Hello, miss, can I ask you a question? How do you like to style your hair?" To this day, I remember the entire sales pitch word by word, and it
Oh,
was
yeah.
only commission based, no base. So we had to hustle like crazy, long working hours, and that was the first great entry into the world of sales. From there, I went to the army. I was a project manager for a cybersecurity software project. So that's where I got all my technical skills and project management skills, or like I like to say, getting shit done skills, basically. You're only supposed to do 2 years as a woman, but I really liked it, so I served for 5 years. I was an officer, had a lot of fun. That's also where I met my husband. First day of boot camp, he was
Wow.
he was afraid to shoot. I shot for him, so that's how we met.
You
True
played
story.
Cupid.
Over him of his life.
Yeah. So finished the army, went into the startup world, and that's where I've been since. So I've been fortunate to be part of three incredible startups. The first one I joined as a QA engineer while I was getting my computer science degree, and the startup grew very fast, and I grew together with it. So by the time I was 27, I was already managing 50 people, 5 teams, everything that had to do with customer management and delivery. And then from there, I moved to my second startup that was doing cloud computing cost optimization. So mostly selling to tech companies. I had some experience selling to healthcare system back then, but Hyro is the first startup that I've actually only focused into in healthcare, selling to healthcare systems and helping them close that gap between patients' expectations and workforce capacity challenges. And so I've always been around customer facing roles. The second startups is where I got into a formal sales role. I relocated with them to the US, to San Francisco, to build their sales organization in North America. The startup did very well. I was the first salesperson outside of Israel for them, but within a year and a half, we already had 3 teams in California and in New York, and the company was acquired by NetApp for almost $500 million. So that was amazing. And then at Hyro from day one, it was all about sales and customer management and partnership.
So you left behind fairly quickly selling hair colors. You moved well past that. Just one throwback question. You may or may not remember, how many no's would you get before you got a yes? Just generalize, if you will, when you were in the aisle there at the department store.
I would say 9 out of 10 it was a no.
Yeah,
But then the yes was amazing because I would ask, "How do you like to style your hair?" And then they would tell me they've never tried curling it before. I would be amazed, and then I would ask them to take a seat and be my beautiful model, and then I would curl their hair for half an hour, and it was just a lot of fun.
that's
So
phenomenal.
definitely a lot of no's before getting a yes, and that translates very well to tech sales, right? So when I first started at Hyro, we didn't even have a website. So
Really?
try selling an enterprise solution to CIOs without having a website
Well, and in healthcare, because
in healthcare.
I mean, Lauren, you certainly have experienced this. I don't think healthcare CIOs and healthcare general are known for, hey, let's go take a risk.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, it's a unique atmosphere. So Michael, guide us a little bit. I mean, I love that formative experience, if you will, that cold call framework. But as you moved up through the ranks, both in the two earlier startups and then at Hyro, what were those first days like? As you said, no website, not go off on a side, but I'm sure Hyro is not the easiest name to have someone remember and pronounce the first time you're saying it to them. How did you get a CIO to pay attention, and what was your strategy or tactic that worked the best 6 years ago when y'all were first getting started?
So funny story, we weren't named Hyro when I got started. We were Airbud. And
Uh,
then after having a few conversations with American CIOs, I was like, okay, apparently Airbud is a dog that plays basketball.
that's right.
So
Yes.
we need to change our name. And luckily enough, we have the best marketing guru working for us as our chief marketing officer, which is why we have such a strong brand. So he really transformed our brand, named it Hyro. Everything about our brand, by the way, has a lot of thought behind it. So like our logo is the North Star because we guide patients through the journey, and the colors and the name. So Hyro is short for hieroglyphics, which is one of the first recorded languages. So a lot of thought came into that. But So back to your question, I think early days, the first thing you learn as you start going into healthcare sales is that it's not traditional sales. It's the band or medic, they don't work. You can't go into a first call and ask them if they have budgets, especially if you're selling emerging technologies. So I was looking for those early adopters. I was looking for CIOs that went on a podcast and talked about a specific problem that we solve for. And then I would do a super personalized outreach and I would mention that podcast. I would mention the problem that they're trying to solve. I would say that we're an early startup, and if we can earn a few minutes of your time to walk you through some ideas that we have on how we can help solve that problem, and here's why we are positioned to be the best team to solve for that specific problem. Of course, again, 9 out of 10, or even 90 out of 99 out of 100 would say no. But then you get that one early adopter innovative CIO that would listen and have that conversation with you and have a collaborative mindset, and would help us solve that problem. And I was also looking, if I'm being honest, for innovators that like to talk about their success, because at that early stage, you need success stories and case studies, and it's not helpful at all if you just have one win and no one hears about it. So that's the persona I was going after.
Notice that with the logos on your beautiful website, which is like they're some of the most innovative organizations in healthcare, which, like, again, kudos to you and your team for being able to land those like earlier in your growth journey. And the success stories are like incredible, like very impactful, and no doubt are going to continue to carry you guys through this like next phase of growth that you're going on. So yeah. And you
Thank
just
you.
gave a master class on how to cold prospect the right way. Because I think the way you did it is exactly how you should do it. You're still going to get a lot of no's because it's sales and it's prospecting, but you did it intentionally and thoughtfully of like, how am I going to get this person's attention with something they care about? And you really did that, took that time to do that research. Like, that's really what it's all about.
Thank you very much.
Michael, to Lauren's point, one of the things that jumped off to me, and quite frankly, I just made a note because part of the beauty of doing this podcast is I learn every time I hear you or Lauren or somebody else tell one of these stories. But that additional focus of someone who wants to talk about their success as an early, if you will, narrow the aperture of who you want to talk to, that's a really powerful thing. Because, as you mentioned, early adopters and then early stage companies, you need those megaphones. I don't know that when I've built out sales programs, I've used that as a filter. So I took that down. I'm going to copy that shamelessly, if you will. You were the first or really early as a salesperson at Hyro. Obviously, had built teams at those two other startups, et cetera. There is a distinction between doing the thing yourself and then you build a team to go do that thing. How did you think about taking the things you do naturally or you've grown up doing, if you will, and then building that into your team? What were some of the processes that you leaned on or structures that really made your teams successful going forward?
So, one, we had a journey that we internally went through to understand that selling into healthcare, you need salespeople that have been selling into healthcare for
Mm.
many years, understand the jargon, understand the problems, and has that collaborative mindset that can be a trusted advisor instead of a salesperson. So that's the first learning we had. And then me and my boss, Israel, our CEO, we always talk about this one word when we look for a team member: hunger. And it's how hungry are they to succeed? I think that's the number one indicator for a good team member in a startup, at least. And so they need to know how to hustle, and they need to be creative, and they need to, we're not going to always have a playbook and a step-by-step guide, especially on those early days where we don't know what works well. And so those are the type of people that we were looking for.
Yeah,
Yeah,
they
no,
have to
that's
be a
great.
self-starter, right? Like they have to be a self-starter. To your point, you don't have playbooks when you're building the plane as you're flying it, right? At these early
Exactly.
stages, like you don't have everything. You didn't have a website. You probably didn't have a lot of marketing material to back up the conversations you were having. You might not have had, all like a real standard process, right? So it's like you've got to look for those people who have done that work before elsewhere and are comfortable in that setting, which is a little bit unknown, right? They're comfortable not having everything figured out for them. And what I would find from my own recruiting and hiring, over the last decade is that organizations that, or reps that came from organizations that had these big brands on their back really struggled to find success in the startup space because they needed that all-encompassing support that comes with those big brands that you don't have at startups, right? You have to wear so many different hats in that space, even the sellers and leadership too. So talk a little bit about all the hats you wore, probably early stage, that was beyond just selling.
So early days, people would ask me, "What do you do?" I said, "Well, everything, including cleaning the toilet." So it's
I'm gonna do it.
I must say that in my journey through these 3 startups, I think I've done every single possible role. I was even a release manager for a while.
Really?
I know how to build releases and release plans with customers. I managed pilots for a while. I did QA. I was a team lead for QA testers. I ran a 24/7 support team with 40 people for a while.
Wow.
So I've pretty much done anything possible when it comes to startups. But I would say my all-time favorite is having those relationships with customers and partners, which is why I'm doubling down on that for now at Hyro. And especially in healthcare, relationships are everything. That's one of the Hyro's company values. Relationships are everything. And so developing those relationships and really making sure I set aside time specifically for relationship building. So if you would ask me like, what is a good advice I have for healthcare and salespeople? It's make time for in-person, make sure you always have the next conference on your schedule or the next dinner with a customer. And that's where you hear about their real problems. And that's where you can really make an impact.
I want to say amen to that.
Yes.
Like, absolutely.
Well,
Absolutely. It's all relationship in this industry, and it can carry you on through multiple companies and brands if you do it right. So absolutely.
And that's
I
how I got into Chime. Chime is all about that network and relationship and cultivating collaboration. And so from the early days at Hyro, we became a foundation firm for Chime. I would say 90% of my relationships came through Chime.
That's a great testimony for Chime. And Chime's a wonderful observation. I don't doubt that a majority of our audience knows who Chime is, but I will give a shout out. If you're not familiar with Chime, you should check it out. And certainly if you're in the digital healthcare space, that is an organization that you should plug into. As Michael has illustrated, it is a great jumping off point to build relationships. Both Michael and Lauren, you have built really powerful growth teams in digital healthcare companies. And Michael, you use this phrase when you talked about traits that you're looking for when you hire someone, which is, and one of those was hunger. I'd just be curious, and Michael, you can start. How do you identify that? Like when you're talking to a person that's either interviewing or perhaps someone who's not, but you've gone out and found, how do you determine, hey, this person's hungry, they're gritty?
So, first of all, use GPT and ask him to generate interview questions on identifying hunger for salespeople. I do not take a single interview now without creating the questions through GPT.
That's awesome.
It's really good at it. But in practicality, so first of all, I ask them what wakes them up in the morning. What are they working
Mm,
for? And then you hear about the kids in college and you hear about all the reasons why, right? So you need motivation. That's
yeah.
one. So what's their motivation? And then I ask them to tell me a story of how they got a really big account without knowing anyone before.
Oh, good. Yeah.
And I hear about all the strategies they had to get in. And then I always like to ask also about an opportunity they lost and what they learned from it. And then I see how much they developed that learning afterward.
That's really good advice. Lauren, what are there any tips and tricks that you've used as you built teams to really tease out how gritty is that person?
References, to be
Mm.
honest. So in the past, I've leveraged references that they provide, which are going to be pretty positive because that's how, we're all guilty of gaming the system that way. But leveraging references that they don't give. So LinkedIn's a wonderful resource to that. You can see who people are connected to, and healthcare is a small industry, particularly on the sales side. And, if I've just myself have been in the industry for 20 years and know sales leaders all over the industry, but other people on my team know people all over the industry. So I don't know. I'm a big fan of kind of backdooring references and really asking that question. I think you, Michael, you say it nicer, but like the former term that I'm familiar with is like, are they a killer? You know, and
Yeah.
it's like, right? Like, are they going to go into battle and 10 out of 10 times come out on the other side the winner? Like, they just have that in them. And surprisingly, like, there are a lot of really great candidates out there that meet that qualification, but there also are a lot that don't, that are better suited for maybe account management roles or other role, you know, that, you know, they just have a little book of business. But when you need hunters, you need people that are going to go out and build, you know, something from nothing. You've got to
So
have that like killer instinct.
for references, I love asking them, tell me who's your all-time favorite customer. And I hope our future candidates won't listen to the interview because then they'll get all the questions in advance. But I say like, who's your all-time favorite customer? And then I ask them why. And then I tell them who did you enjoy working with? And then I say, would you be comfortable giving them as a reference? And then you see like who's been like honest and who's
Yeah. And ask them for references of not just colleagues and former managers, but of clients they've worked with. Because if they worked with somebody 10 years ago and that person's willing to take a call from me to talk to me about that person, that
they did
says
something well.
a lot. That says a lot for somebody to say, I haven't sold to them and or bought from them in 5 years, but I remember how great they are to work with and would buy from them again, kind of thing. Now, the goal isn't to get them to buy anything from you and the company you're saying. It's to get, you know, make sure you're making a good hire, but it's really, really powerful for candidates that can build those types of relationships that last long enough. That's what you need as an organization.
So I'm going to pause for a moment, and I'm actually going to say, one, I hope that people who are thinking about applying for Hyro are listening to this, and not because they're getting the cheat codes, but more so, I would advise for our audience, there are people who are naturally gifted when it comes to sales, and for everybody else, and I'll raise my hand, I am not naturally gifted when it comes to sales. It's learning, it's practice, and it's intentionality. And as I listen, Michael, to what you just said, and Lauren, to what you said, I would encourage all of our audience members to be intentional, not just when you prepare for an interview, and that these might be the questions that you come up, but then that translates into how you prepare to go attack your territory or engage people and build relationships. So wonderful, wonderful advice. And yes, I did make a note, do all interviews with Chat GPT questions. That is the cheat code. So fantastic. Michael, you also used the phrase both early on, you know, as you were doing some of the initial sales work and then starting building teams, but you dropped the phrase conferences. And I just want to hit on that for a moment. And Lauren, you've spent a lot of time with conferences as well. I feel like conferences sometimes get a dirty name to them. Oh, I'm going to the conference, et cetera. Share with us a little bit about how you and more broadly Hyro have thought about using conference in terms of building those relationships and advancing sales conversations, and any advice that you would have out to salespeople in the audience around how they should think about making the best use of the conferences that they actually go to.
Yeah. So you want me to go first, Lauren?
Yeah.
So conferences is your opportunity to have in-person time with so many different prospects and clients and partners, right? Versus flying somewhere and having just one dinner. So that's how I think about it. It's an opportunity for a lot of people on site with you. So that's one. Number two, I think that the prep work. So we almost all of the meetings we have at a conference are pre-booked before the conference. So we do a lot of work on getting
Yeah.
those meetings scheduled. And even if you have people that tell you, oh, I'll find your booth, we'll make temperate, we put a hold on their calendar. We say, no problem. Let me just send you a placeholder so you remember to go to our booth. So that way they have it on the calendar. They have the number of the booth so they know how to drop. And then on the day of, we send them a selfie from the booth in a text message usually because that's way more personable. And we say,
Yeah.
hey, we're waiting for you. And so make it personable, make it fun. Vive is like such a great success story for conferences because we've been sponsoring since the first Vive 4 years ago. The first time it was me and two more people with a tiny kiosk and a laptop, and no one knew who. And I mean, some people knew who we are. We still had 60 meetings pre-booked for that specific for conference, and it went really well. But this year, 4 years after, right, we had this magnificent booth, and I walked in for just the first 10 minutes. I couldn't stop saying wow, looking at it. It was so beautiful. We had 14 people coming from the Hyro team. Everyone wanted to visit us. We had 150 meetings pre-booked, and it was such a fun feeling because customers came over and shared their love, and partners came over, and prospects came over, and everyone wanted to work with us. So it just goes to show you how investing time in those conferences, in the presence, and doing the groundwork, making sure you have pre-booked meetings, and then taking use of the expo hall as well. And I don't know if it's the difference between Americans and Israelis, because the Israelis have more nerves and we're a little bit more direct. But we stand at the front of the booth and we like bring people in. We're like, "Hi, good morning. How's the conference going for you?"
Yeah, that's great advice. I mean, Lauren, I know we talked on your episode about the preparation around conferences. I mean, I'd just be curious, probably a very similar perspective, but any advice, if you will, to our audience, how should they think about making the best use of that time to build relationships?
I think Michael nailed it. I mean, it's all about the prep and it's all about the meetings that you schedule in advance. Even if you get an occasional no-show, which you probably will, like you still can follow up with them in a meaningful way because now they owe you. Now they said they were going to come and they didn't. And they're still probably pretty likely to take a meeting with you even after the conference. So for me, it's all about the prep and all about the follow-up to get that ROI out of that, out of that conference. But I don't know. I'm of the opinion that's not necessary to have a booth at every conference. Like you can just send people that have badges to take meetings at or near the conference location and still have a successful meeting. And so, we used a tactic like that at Arcadia a little bit, where we were giving each region the ability to have their own little budget to go buy badges at these smaller conferences where they were able to have more engagement. So I think it's all about the prep. It's all about the follow-up and being smart about where are your buyers, where are they spending their time, and going to them. I think is really important.
And scheduling the follow-up on site, because afterwards they're going to get so many emails. It's like, again, 9 out of 10, it won't happen. But every time you finish a meeting at the conference, let's open our calendar now and schedule our next touch point. You're going to get so many emails and we'll get lost.
I love that. I love that trip. Schedule when you're in the meeting, the next meeting. That's wonderful advice. I just would echo what you both said. I think that especially if you're an individual contributor, if you're an individual salesperson, sometimes it can probably feel tiresome to go to conference after conference. It's a lot of people you're trying to navigate, etc. I just will say personally, it was probably a formative experience for me to be, as an early salesperson, to be in the booth, to have to tell the story over and over. And some of the best advice, I'm going to give a shout out to an executive I had. His name's Dick Flanagan. He would beat into us. When you're in the booth, you're not on your phone. And this was before we had fancy phones, but you're not on the phone. You're not talking to the people that you work with, because you're there to talk to the people who are at the conference. And Michael, like you said, you're facing outward and trying to bring people in versus the back to the crowd and facing inward and telling people you want them to stay outward. And those are easy things to say, hard things sometimes to remember to do, but were certainly formative experiences. I want to go back, Michael, as y'all have built the team there at Hyro. Is there a particular methodology that you've adhered to as you've created more structure, you've added team members? You referenced a couple of phrases, BANT or MEDIC, et cetera, but is there something specific, and maybe not, but that has worked out well for how you keep structure within your sales process to move opportunities forward?
It might sound trivial, but for us, it's a Salesforce hygiene. So we use Salesforce. And before I joined, I told my CEO, if you want me to join the company, I want to see a receipt that you got Salesforce and that you're logging all of your sales meetings, because I don't want to be chasing you around to ask who you've been talking to. So in Salesforce, what we did is we looked at all the deals we've won and we tried to see what is the common thread between them. And then for every step in the process, we defined what is important to move on to the next steps. And we have this checkbox in Salesforce for every step. And we have fields you need to fill in, like who's the decision maker, who's the buyer, and all of that. And then in order to move between steps in Salesforce, you have to fill that in. It won't let you close. It won't let you move on without filling in those details. And so that's what we did. We took all the best practices from Band and Medic and all of that, and we kind of made it our own.
Fantastic.
Even when you in Salesforce or any CRM that you're using, you always have, everybody has a linear kind of process that you want to bring buyers through. That's your, in my mind, that's your sales process, which doesn't always align, right, with the buyer buying process, right? That is not linear, particularly when you're selling at the enterprise level. So can you talk a little bit about anything that you feel like has made your team successful selling at the enterprise where, you know, it's one step forward, two steps back, it's new leaders, it's turnover, it's, you know, budget cuts, it's all of these things that keep us from, okay, we checked that box, now we can move to this step, now we can move to this step.
For us, it's the buyer map. So we've identified which groups and which titles within every group has to be involved as part of the sales process. And we make sure that we address all of these groups. So even if the VP of Patient Access is our champion and leading the deal, we know that if we have not met the CIO, there is no way the deal will close. So we have to make sure that no matter where in the process, the entire buyer map is filled. And that's also the things we flag. So if we are in an advanced stage of the opportunity, but we haven't met this person, we haven't talked to this person, we sell call center solutions, right? So if we have not met the person who's managing the agents at the call center, it's not going to work. So that's how we tackle that non-linear process.
I think that's that's really good advice for our audience as they think about replicating a similar process. I'm curious, Michael, with those requirements in your sales team, you can obviously set expectations and hold your team members accountable for doing that. When do you prevent deals from being forecasted if they don't meet those requirements? Or do you sometimes have reps say, hey, this deal's going to happen this quarter, but you're like, I'm not going to put this in my forecast that I'm giving to the CEO because it doesn't have these three things?
100%. So we have 3 forecast categories,
Mm.
and you're prevented from putting something on commit if these certain checkboxes are not being met. I can tell you, I have a sweet spot for configuring Salesforce. I was our Salesforce admin up until 6 months ago when we hired.
Wow.
Yeah, we hired an incredible RevOps manager who's doing a phenomenal job. I had to give away my admin rights, which was very sad. But I think there's so much power in enforcing processes through these types of tools. So that's one of my favorite things to do, to think about one field I can add to Salesforce that's going to completely change the behavior of the sales team. So yes, you cannot commit opportunities and unless you've met specific criteria. And we use commit as what we project to the leadership and to the board.
Gotcha. When do you just got us a little? I know we didn't necessarily talk about this in preparation, but I'm just curious, and as much as appropriate. But what does your sales review process look like? Meaning, as you get to forecasting, I typically think of things because I've grown up mainly in publicly traded companies in 90-day segments. Is that how you, Hyro, as a privately held startup, do y'all think in 90-day segments and have a regiment around forecasting deals based on that 90-day sequence?
90 days in healthcare, a sales process can take 2 years.
That's true. That's true. So what does that look like? What does the sequence as you take your sales team members through looking at pipeline versus what's forecasted versus what gets to commit, et cetera?
So our targets are annual.
Okay.
And we
Right.
try to break it down to quarterly.
Yeah.
It's been a challenge, I
Yeah.
can say, kind of tackling that and trying to, because not every quarter is going to be the same, right? In healthcare, historically, Q1 is very challenging and so on. So trying to be smart about it and looking at the history. And we do put quarterly targets, but they're not really tied to commissions and to
Yeah.
KPI.
Yeah. Lauren, I know we didn't talk about this when we did the episode with you, but I'm curious, did y'all have a similar cadence? Meaning, did y'all think in 90-day segments, or also Arcadia, where you were prior to starting the growth opportunity, also privately held, were the measurements or cadence more built around an annual target, if you will?
No, we had quarterly targets at Arcadia, but that doesn't mean your sales cycle still is what it is. So
Yeah.
we were kind of looking at 1 to 2 quarters out at any given point in time. Anything beyond that was too far out to really have a good sense of confidence. So you've had your most confidence in what's 90 days out, because those should be either already have vendor of choice or extremely close to having vendor of choice. Maybe you're a finalist. Things that were 6 months out were things that maybe RFPs where you were down selected, or deals that had a lot of momentum and were having a lot of activity, but you weren't quite yet vendor of choice. Like, so we were kind of tracking always in a 1 to 2 quarter out view. But as Michael calls out, like, Q1's notoriously hard. I would venture to say 90% of organizations out there, if you're selling in the provider space, you have big jumps in Q2 and you have big jumps in Q4, because those align with the fiscal years of health systems, which is usually June or December. And so, like, we can try to, pull things into Q1 or pull things into Q3 or whatever. It's a lot harder than it looks for those of us that have to manage negotiating that with your buyer and trying to pull in deals any earlier than they're ready to sign. Like, it's just a challenge.
Yeah, I can appreciate that. And by the way, for our audience, one of the things I picked up, Lauren, that you just said, which is be knowledgeable about when your buyers can buy. And I know you asked that question to Michael in terms of the distinction between buyer process versus your sales process. But I think sometimes as sellers, and especially as growth leaders, we sometimes forget that not only do our buyers have a buyer process, but they also have a budget sequence. They can't always buy things if they're out of budget, and the budget doesn't come up again until the next month. So that is a great reminder for us to be thoughtful, if you will, in terms of how we think about that. Michael, I'm going to turn a little bit from the sales process, and I want to ask more kind of a broader question about the industry, healthcare specific. Hyro is really at the tip of the spear, my opinion. You can guide me if I'm wrong, but at the tip of the spear in talking about adoption of artificial intelligence, especially as it pertains to the health system engaging with the patient. How is that conversation going? Healthcare is notoriously laggard for technology, mainly on the software space, because they'll buy a bunch of scanners and MRIs, et cetera, et cetera. What's been your experience in helping health systems navigate this incredibly fast-paced technology innovation that we're experiencing around artificial intelligence?
So there is such a fun shift happening around that, and it's fun especially for us, right? So when we first got started, we had this educational piece in the sales process of what is AI, why do you need AI, how can AI help for healthcare systems? And about 2 years ago, right around the time GPT gained its popularity, it's changed so drastically. We now have CIOs signing up on our website asking, how quickly can you help me deploy large language models in my
Wow.
website, in my call center? It's been such a fun shift, and the momentum is out there, and we're riding that now, and it's been more exciting than ever to see. I think we all like to say, and healthcare has been notoriously famous for being slow to adopt. I think that's changing very
Mm-hmm.
quickly, and I think AI is enabling that, because of the how quickly you can adapt to it and deploy it, and quite honestly, because all of us are using AI now in everything we do on our day to day. So it's creating that change of mindset. I think the next 2 years are going to be all around removing the fear of it.
Yes.
And like my good friend Craig Richardville likes to say, you're not going to lose your job to AI. You're going to lose your job if you don't adopt AI. So that's kind of the shift that the mindset shift we're going to have to educate towards. But I think in the next 2 years, it's going to be solved. Everyone's going to get used to the idea. And then the pace of change is going to be so fast. And we're going to see healthcare catching up to all the other industries.
I think that's true. And Craig, and for our listeners, Craig has been a luminary in the healthcare space. I probably won't get all of his stops correct, but I know when I interacted with him, he was the chief information officer at what's now Atrium Healthcare out of North Carolina. He spent quite a bit of time at Intermountain, among other things, and he's spot on. It's not necessarily going to replace you. It will replace you if you don't adopt it. And I think we're hearing very similar topics or very similar discussion points on the provider side, and what I would argue is a really healthy dialogue of the role artificial intelligence plays in terms of patient engagement, patient care, et cetera, and how physicians, providers, nurses should think about that. Turning back more to sales methodology, as you touched on, it's incredibly fast how it's been woven into our day-to-day lives. How do you see, or do you have ways there at Hyro that y'all are adopting AI tools to advance the sales process?
Hmm. Yes. So I'm sure you've all heard about the letter from Shopify's CEO to his employees about how everyone must use AI now. It's not a nice to have, it's a requirement. And I like it that he gave specific examples of things that from now on has to be created with AI, like product requirements, definition, mockups. From now on, you need to use AI to create those. So we kind of had the same conversation internally at Hyro, and we started this collaboration of sharing ideas of how people are using it. And so it's been a lot of fun. I use it for every piece of content that I generate, every LinkedIn post I do, preparing for podcasts and webinars and putting
Yeah.
together my answers. Every complex email where I need some help making sure my message is coming through. Internal Slack message where when it comes to internal Slack message, I've been notoriously known for being like a mean person because I just bark instructions. So now I have this prompt I use, make it more friendly, make it, does it get the message across? So I use it for that. I use it to create a territory map for our sales team based on different states, and I told them
Really?
where our salespeople live, and so they created the territories based on the states that are close to them, and then
Yeah.
I asked it to create a visual map, and it created a map for me. And so we use it in everything we do. More systematically, we started
Hmm.
using a recording tool. So we're using Chorus that records every sales meeting we have, automatically summarizes it, generates action items out of it. It's synchronized into Salesforce. So now every meeting we have with a prospect, I can go in, and or even with the customer, our entire customer success team and partnerships team are also using that. So I can go into Salesforce, pull up the account. I have a recording of all the meetings we had with them. A summary of every meeting is automatically populated into Salesforce, and the action items are there. So you no longer have to spend your time writing notes. Yeah, you can be fully invested in the conversation that you have, which has been great. And now we're trying to think of ways we can use it more systematically across the entire company.
Lauren, as you are guiding growth teams, were y'all using some of these tools, these AI tools, or did you or did some of the salespeople, did you see that impacting the sales process yourself?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Crazy to be using Chat GPT now to help just save you time and do things more efficiently. And Michael, like you said, like I love the ability to say, make this nicer or make this sound more professional, or, I need this to resonate with a CIO buyer that's going to be receiving this email. I need to make sure that it's for an executive audience. Like there's so many cues that can help you or anybody on your team, you know, just communicate more effectively. We used it. We ran a workshop as part of like our sales kickoff one year around a team building event where we put everybody in teams, and we were like, you're going to spend the next 2 hours, you're going to be playing on ChatGPT, and you're going to figure out a business problem that we need to solve with ChatGPT. And we got some super fun, ideas back. And at that point, I think some people were like scared to start using it or weren't sure how. And I think just after a few hours of messing around with it without there being any like high pressure or any deliverable or anything like that, it gave people more confidence to say, okay, I think I can try this. And so it's used in, prospecting messaging. It's used for RFPs. You get these massive 100-page RFPs that come in. You could pop it in there and say, all right, you know me, you know my business. What are our win themes? Like, how do we make sure that we're going to nail this, RFP response? What are the things we need to focus on? What are the things we should lean away from? What might this RFP, like, what's like, read between the lines, right? Of what they're saying on the RFP of like, what might they really be looking for? And like, I don't know. I mean, it can give it back to you in a minute. I mean, it's like quite impressive. Prepping for sales meetings, right? Here's my outline of the meeting that I'm going to be having. Like, what else am I forgetting? What else could I be asking? What would be a good follow-up? And the more at Arcadia, we had an enterprise GPT account, which allowed us to be able to put proprietary like Arcadia information in there, which you wouldn't necessarily want to do with just your free chat GPT, but like it allowed us to put information in there. And so it just got better and better and better and better at, as it should and as it's supposed to, at helping support the sales cycle and all different parts of it. So you can help with pricing, how to make this less complicated, how to make my proposal more impactful, how do I write an executive summary for this RFP that's really going to hit on X, Y, and Z. I mean, there's just so many things.
I struggle, for our audience, and I fully expect that a majority, if not nearly all of our audience have adopted, because as we said earlier, it's just become interwoven. But I would point out, especially for those of us that are with digital health companies that have an AI component to it, if you are not using it fairly systematically, it will be hard for you to convey trust to your clients around why they should trust not just your solution, but the applicability. And Michael, you talked earlier, once again, that wonderful quote from Craig about it won't replace you if you, but it would replace you if you're not adopting it. I think that goes to salespeople as well, which is you're not going to be replaced by AI. You're going to be replaced by the person using AI effectively. And part of that comes into how it helps you tell a story of trust, of comfort, of capability for the products that you're offering to your clients. Yeah, just that hit me as both of you are talking. Fantastic. So, Michael, you have had a journey. No two ways about it. Just a really remarkable journey between your early experiences, building teams in 3 different startups. Not everyone can say that, in successful startups, culminating where we are today with you as the chief strategy officer at Hyro. You were the chief revenue officer. You were also the chief operating officer, et cetera. That's a lot. There's a lot of stuff going on. How do you do it?
Well, my mom used to say, I'll rest in my grave. So it's definitely a hustle, but that's what I like about it. I love startups because you get to feel the impact. You always have an impact, and the job is always what you're going to make of it. There's no limits. And so I like to think about what are the top priorities and make sure I tackle them and make real change. And also keep in mind wellness, right? At Hyro, we are really all about work hard, play hard. So at Vibe, for example, after we had that great experience, we all went partied when we partied until 3 a.m.
That's not late. It's early.
It was so fun. And so I make sure to enjoy the journey. I travel all the time with work, and I always make sure that I extend it for the weekend and get to enjoy the place I'm going to. My first business trip was to Australia. I was a QA engineer, and I heard that they're looking for someone to go for a whole month. And I was like, if you need someone, I am happy to volunteer. And they're like, you've never talked to a customer in your life. I'm like, okay, I can learn. And then 2 weeks after, they came to me and like, were you serious? Hell yeah. So that was my first business trip. I went to Australia for a whole month, and then I took a whole week extra and I just backpacked throughout Australia, which was really, really fun. And so making sure you enjoy the journey is very important, I would say. And then always setting boundaries. So I really like to go to our office. We have a fun office here in Oakland, and I like to make sure that I separate between home and the office. And now it's Friday, so I'm at my home office. On Fridays, I try to work from home, but really making sure you put those boundaries. And I like to set plans for after work, and that way I have to stop.
Ooh, that's going to keep your social calendar busy. So you're forced to not work.
Exactly.
I love that. That's good advice.
That is good advice. I could take that advice.
Yeah, I know. I'm boring. Like you would not catch me out till 3 o'clock in the morning, even if you paid me $1 million. I don't think I could make it. I think last night I was asleep at 8 o'clock. So bad.
That's fun.
But good for you. Good for you. That's
yes,
right.
I love that.
Michael, it's so clear that you're like a badass, right? Like you really know your stuff. You really know this industry. You've had so much success. And, as a female leader, and what I think is still a very an industry that still underrepresents like female leadership, having female leadership at the table. Like, do you have any advice for how you've navigated that, and or for organizations that want to do a better job of like elevating and retaining like women on their leadership team?
Yeah, so it's funny. At my previous startup, we were going a lot to AWS conferences, cloud conferences. And in the cloud industry, it's so male dominated. We had a Facebook group called The Line to the Men's Restroom. And that Facebook group was pictures of the line to the men's restroom in AWS conferences because it's the only place on earth where there's no line to the women's restroom, which was hilarious. So when I got into healthcare and I went into healthcare conferences, I was so pleasantly surprised to see how many badass women are in this space and how many female CIOs are out there. And so that was really encouraging. I will say I like to be vocal about the bias when it comes to women and technology. One time I was on a meeting with a prospect. They were 19 men from the IT on the other side and just me from Hyro. And I started noticing that they think I'm not technical. And so I said, guys, I want to stop you for a second. And I just want to bring to your awareness that I kind of have the feeling that you think that I'm not technical. So I just want to let you know I have a degree in computer science and I could be very dangerous and I can probably answer every technical question that you have. So just be aware that you probably have that bias. And now that you ask your questions, feel free to ask whatever you want. And the conversation just did a whole 180. Like it was such a not a nice conversation and I felt like they're not getting what they want. And that changed the conversation. And sometimes it's really hard to be vocal about it and say like, hey, wait a second, maybe that you have that bias and you're not aware. So I do like to be vocal about it. And I will say internally for organizations, I always hear on interviews when I'm interviewing women that they were motivated to apply to Hyro because they see a strong female leadership. So as long as you have that all the way to the top, it will bring on other women to follow.
I hear that. I hear that too in interviews and working with teams of like, people so appreciate women early and mid career, so appreciate, seeing women in high level executive roles as someone to, well, if she can do it, then certainly I can do it. And knowing that they can do it at that organization, they don't have to go somewhere else to do it, that their company prioritizes and considers that to be very important.
And I do have one more practical advice. So there's this really great workshop that Google developed called I Am Remarkable because
Okay.
they've identified and they give it away for free. Whoever wants it, go to iamremarkable.com or something like that, and you can schedule it for your organization. And they've identified that women struggle talking about their achievements. And the tagline of this is it ain't bragging if it's based on fact. And they teach you how to own your achievements and to market yourself better. And I personally, this was super helpful for me. And I highly encourage everyone to get that workshop for their organization.
I love that. Say the name of the workshop again.
I Am Remarkable.
I am remarkable. We're gonna put it up. It'll be a graphic here. That's a great recommendation. Well, I would say I'm inspired, Michael and Lauren, by both of you. I watched both of your careers from a distance. I've now had the pleasure of spending time individually and collectively with both of you, and I can tell you, I have learned a tremendous amount in terms of how you have prosecuted your careers, your sales positions, and taught others, and it's really impressive to see what you've been able to accomplish, and certainly will continue to go on and accomplish. Michael, in that same vein, I'm gonna pick up what Lauren asked, but as you give advice to other leaders, what are some of the things that, as you've experienced and grown in your career, that you would challenge people to say, hey, if I want to be like Michael, other than perhaps having to join the military and be a cyber person, because not everyone has that opportunity. But kudos if you can get it. What would you tell other aspiring leaders that, hey, focus on this or do this if you want to be like me?
I would say something I would tell my younger self: talk less, listen more, which ties very nicely to relationships are everything, right? So make sure you prioritize getting to know the person, both externally when you're selling and internally with your colleagues. So talk less, listen more. I have a funny story that in my first startup, 5 years in, I was already managing a lot of people. And then the CTO, who is my really good friend, today he's married to one of my high school friends that I introduced him to with 4 kids. That's how close we were. So one day he comes over and he says, Michael, let's go out for a walk. I need to talk to you. And he's like, I love you dearly, but everyone hates you. And I'm like, what? And he's like, you can't just always be right and it creates and carry bad news because that just creates antagonism. So you have to make sure that you're motivating everyone to support you in how to fix things. And that was such a wake up call for me. I completely changed the way I communicate, the way I explain things that we need as a company. So I would encourage, and that goes back to talk less, listen more. So always never present a problem without this possible solution. Make sure you always explain why we need to fix this and how we can fix it together and get everyone behind you to help fix it. And so that's the advice I would give.
That's fantastic advice. I love that, and it makes me think of, there's a book I've read, maybe y'all have heard about, or maybe I've read. It's called Radical Candor, and so the conversation that your friend, your CTO, had with you, to me, really embodies that spirit. And I would, I can't speak for how he was feeling when he felt like he had that, he needed to have that conversation with you. But I know those are hard things to do. And kudos to him for being willing to lean in or lean out, however you want to phrase it, to give you that advice. And then kudos for how you've ingested that and obviously taking forward in your career. Well, as we bring this to a close, I wanted to ask just one probably really off the reservation question, Michael, for you. And Lauren, I couldn't, when we did the session with you, I didn't have the chance to dig up something that you've talked about that maybe nobody else had heard or seen. So shame on me, I didn't do my research well enough for that. But Michael, I was listening to a podcast that you were on, and the person asked, "Hey, I heard that you used to be a dancer, and you talked about being a dancer, but you made this comment, and I just would like you to explain to our audience, what is Israeli folk dancing, and is that really as competitive as you made it?"
Very embarrassing. It's a form of dance that was created so Israel is a country of immigrants. Almost every person my age you meet, their grandparents were not born in Israel. So, for example, from my mother's side, they came from Poland, from my dad, from Germany and Uzbekistan. And it's the case for everyone. So when they came to Israel, they went to the streets to celebrate the formation of this new country. And they just danced in circles in the most intuitive form. And that became like a formal Israeli folk dancing. So it's kind of like a mix of all different cultures. And now we've taken it to the next step with like a lot of influence from modern dancing. And so I did that professionally. I know it sounds weird, for a very long time. And I was part of an Israeli folk dancing group. But I got to travel the world with it. So when I was 15, we went to Brazil for a whole month to perform. And we performed in France, Russia, Berlin. Yeah, so that was a lot of fun, but there's no real good definition of Israeli folk dancing. You can just Google it in YouTube and you'll probably see me then.
That's phenomenal. That's phenomenal. Lauren, I don't know about you, but there's nothing competitive about my dancing. I think, Michael, you would certainly give us a run for our money. Michael, I would say thank you for joining. This has been a phenomenal conversation. And Lauren, thank you for being an alumni and a wonderful guest host. This has just been a real treat with both of you. Michael, I wish you the best. As I said earlier, I am unabashedly a fan, not only of what you're doing in your career, but what Hyro has done. I don't just have the swag here because we're doing the podcast. I actually keep that. It's a great reminder of some of the experiences. So best of luck as you're out in the marketplace. Thank you for the time. This has been a wonderful episode.
Thank you so much for having me and for the time.
All right. Thank you. Thank you for listening. We are excited to bring new episodes out each week. We are incredibly grateful to our guests and our listeners. Let us know what you think by commenting on the episodes. We are proudly sponsored by the Upper Right Corner, which provides advice on strategic growth, including growth assessments and strategy, go-to-network planning, sales leadership and team coaching, and fractional leadership roles. For more, visit theupperrightcorner.com. Waypoint Healthcare Solutions is also proud to sponsor the Counterweight podcast. Waypoint HCS is a focused consulting organization helping health systems, providers, and organizations to develop and implement patient engagement strategies. Waypoint HCS provides strategic consulting and patient engagement technology guidance and selection. Waypoint also helps support implementation and ongoing program management. For more, visit Waypoint HCS's LinkedIn page or waypointhcs.com. Thank you to our guests and our listeners. As always, you can find us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Subscribe, like, and follow, and we look forward to joining you again next Wednesday for another episode of The Counterweight.